So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindsay Wong, and I'm an author and assistant professor of creative writing in the English department at the University of Winnipeg. I'm a Chinese woman with blonde hair, and I currently have a Zoom background featuring my forthcoming book, Tell Me Pleasant Things About Immortality, which has a neon pink and blue mushrooms on a black background. I want to welcome you to our first event for a publishing speaker series. Today, we're featuring a Q&A with the wonderful and extremely knowledgeable literary agent, Carly Waters. Carly is my own literary agent, and I feel very fortunate to be able to work with her. Today's event will be recorded, so if you do not want to be on camera, please keep your video off. We also ask you to keep your mics muted. The Department of English at the University of Winnipeg acknowledges that we live and work in the territories of the Assiniboine, Cree, Dakota, Dene, Métis, and Oji Cree nations. The University of Winnipeg sits in Treaty 1 territory, the ancestral and traditional homeland of Anishinaabe peoples. This land acknowledgement is about being clear and accurate about the original peoples of this land, as well as other Indigenous communities who lived and continue to live where the University of Winnipeg stands. It is an expression of respect and appreciation for these ancestors and their present-day relatives who continue to love and care for the land. We offer this acknowledgement in the belief that doing so will help us to be mindful educators, researchers, and members of the University of Winnipeg community. Creative writing and publishing, a discipline and industry, is predominantly a white-dominated space. As a settler of color writer, I am not only committed to honoring and following the lead of the land, water, and cultural protectors of this space, but I am also a constant and forever student of the remarkable stories and their tellings by Indigenous peoples here and around the world. Thank you for this space, and I'm very grateful to all of you for joining me today. If you feel moved to, please share where you're coming from in the chat on Zoom. I'm now going to be introducing you to Sam Swatsky, a fourth-year English major in our department. Sam is currently in my fiction workshop, and she will introduce Carly Waters.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yes, as Lindsay said, my name is Sam Swatsky. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a Caucasian woman with chin-length blonde hair, and in the background is a set of paintings with bright pink flowers on a light green background. And I'm going to be introducing Carly Waters. Carly Waters is a senior vice president and senior literary agent at PS Literary and the sitting vice president of the Professional Association of Canadian Literary Agents. Waters has a Bachelor of Arts in English Literature from Queen's University and a Master of Arts in Publishing Studies from City University, London. Her master's thesis was on the social, political, and economic impact of literary prizes on trade publishing. She began her publishing career in London as an assistant at the Darley Anderson Literary Television and Film Agency. Waters joined Toronto-based PS Literary Agency in 2010 and has sold over 100 books during her career. She represents award-winning and best-selling authors in the adult fiction and nonfiction categories and select children's books. Waters is known for her long-term vision for her authors and being an excellent collaborator with a nose for commercial success. She has close ties to publishers in major markets, is a member of the Association of American Literary Agents, and works directly with film agents to option film and television rights to leading networks and production companies. Her clients' books have been translated into 40 languages, optioned for television and film, adapted into podcasts, and have been on every bestseller list from coast to coast, including the New York Times, USA Today, the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Toronto Star, and the Globe and Mail. Waters is also an annual judge for the Women's Fiction Writing Association Rising Star Award. The popular writing podcast, The Shit No One Tells You About Writing, for which Waters is the co-host, has over 700,000 downloads. Please give a warm welcome to Carly Waters.
Thank you so much, Sam. That was really nice. I'm Carly. I have short platinum blonde hair, wearing a blue shirt, and I have a background behind me that's gray and white and has a picture above my head.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam and Carly. Carly, we're really excited to have you here today. Thank you for sharing your time. I think I saw on Twitter that you ate Zoom, so you're very busy.
I won't show you what's around me, but it's like coffee, water, notebook, some remnants of my lunch. But I'm so glad to be here, Lindsay. I always love when you can invite me to different events, and I'm so glad that you got this job. Congrats, Lindsay. I hope you're doing a great job with your new role, and I know that you are. And I hope all your students are benefiting from your amazing knowledge. And yeah, I'm Lindsay's literary agent, and I'm here to answer everybody's questions.
Great. I thought we would just go through the questions that were submitted in advance, and if there's extra time, we'll turn to chat. So let's get started. The first question is, what makes you want to keep reading after the first few pages of a manuscript? What makes you not want to keep reading?
Yeah, so the big thing for me is, one thing I always say is that firstly, as you know from my bio, I've always been an agent, right? Like my training is literary agent. I was never an editor. That's not part of my background. And so I'm not always driven by craft. I'm driven a lot by being a reader, right? Being just a person who works in the business. So I'm thinking about readability and I'm thinking about business. So when I think about what's going to keep me reading after the first few pages, really it's going to be, do I feel like I'm reading an actual book? Like, is there anything potentially taking me out of the scenario? The minute where I put something down and I'm like, picking up my phone, like, scrolling to a different app, or I'm, whatever, like I'm trying, if there's a moment in the first 5 pages where I'm like already my mind is trying to exit, then I know there's just not something there that's grabbing me. The best submissions are the ones where I feel like I'm reading a real book. I just can't wait to pick it back up. And in terms of what makes me not want to keep reading, a lot of it is just confusion. Like I just feel like as a reader, I want to work hard, but I don't want to work too hard. Like it shouldn't be my job as the reader to have to kind of connect too many dots, or feel confused about characters' motivations, things like that. So I really just want like an engaging opening scene that lets me know about who our characters are, what they're motivated by, and oftentimes obviously there's a query, kind of a pitch letter included, so I have an idea of what's to come, and I really just want to be motivated to figure out like what it is that's going to come next.
Yeah, good advice. I think it's always really important to keep the reader engaged, but I always tell my students, we need to hold their hand throughout the narrative, right? They give time markers.
That's your job.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly. Right. Great. And the second question, what is the best advice you can give a budding author who does not have an agent, besides get one?
Yeah, so assuming that this person wants one, is probably kind of the sense that I'm getting. I think, the biggest thing that you can do is just write a really great book, like that's the thing that moves the needle, that gets people's attention. And writers will also ask me, and I'm sure this is the questions about like, marketing my book. I'm like, well, the best marketing tool is your book, right? Like that's what everything stems off of, is how great your book is. What are the themes? What are we excited about? Is it ripped from the headlines, or like, what is it about your actual book, right? Like that's where it all comes from. So the best advice I can give is write the best book you can possibly write. That's the thing that gets people excited. If potentially this person is getting into a situation where they think that they need help, maybe they're getting an offer from a publisher or something like that, and they don't have an agent. In that case, I would recommend still hiring an IP lawyer to look at your contract, even if you don't have an agent at that stage. But really, like you want to be getting an agent, or hoping to get an agent, around the time when you want to pursue traditional publishing and enter into partnerships and contracts with third parties.
Yeah, that's also very important. Publishing contracts, I think they're like 40 pages long. Great. So what is the best way to get connected with a publisher, especially if you are a new writer? What do publishers look for?
So there's a couple different kind of tiers of publishers in the way that we think about it in the marketplace. So there are some large publishers, multinational publishers. If you're interested in this space, you've probably heard of some of them: Simon & Schuster, Penguin, Random House, HarperCollins, those sorts of things. Those publishers you can't access without an agent. And the reason being is just that they are very, very busy organizations, and they rely on agents as part of their ecosystem to kind of develop and find projects for them, and build these relationships so that we know what editors are looking for. So there really isn't a way to kind of, again, access that tier of publishers, but that's without an agent, but that's only one part of the business. There are lots of kind of indie publishers, regional presses that are open, to unsolicited submissions from authors directly. So the best way to get connected with them really is just is to buy their books, go to their signings, when authors from that publisher are having signings, going to their actual events, signing up for their newsletters. If you want to actually learn, like, what is it that publisher wants, really, it's like, what is that publisher publishing? What is doing really well for that publisher? And if you can be on newsletters and follow their socials, get a sense of really what's working for them, and you can kind of see through the bestseller lists and things like that what is working for them. And really, they're probably generally going to want more of the same, unless they have a new publisher or new editorial director. Maybe they're going to be shifting tides or something like that. But generally, publishers want to continue doing what they're doing really well.
Great. I guess indie publish or small press publishing is really similar to academic publishing for a lot of academics trying to break into traditional publishing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Is querying an agent the same as querying a publisher? Do the same suggestions apply?
So for any publisher that is open to unsolicited submissions, they'll have all the information on their website, and it is generally pretty similar. A query letter follows a pretty standard format. I suggest following the hook, book, cook format is what I always say. The hook is obviously, the hook of your book, your comps, what it's about, word count. Second paragraph is that like meatier, like body paragraph about your actual book. And the third is the cook paragraph. It's you're the cook. So that's kind of, the magic formula. How you spin that and how you write it is obviously up to you and your book itself. But yeah, as I said, the larger publishers, you do need to have an agent to kind of access them, but any publisher that is open to unsolicited submissions will want a query letter. I just recommend following the guidelines, meaning like some publishers or agents want, some 5 first pages kind of pasted into the email. Some will only request that, if they're asking for it. A lot of agencies, we don't use this, but a lot of agencies use like Query Tracker or Query Manager. There's some sort of like online software kind of where writers can input their query letters and kind of follow it in a more kind of, I don't know, kind of more robotic way. I don't know a nice way to put it, but a more formulaic kind of way of inputting your data kind of into a spreadsheet type of thing. But we just receive email submissions is how our agency works.
Great. Why do you limit submissions to just a query letter? Can you share query letter examples that sparked you to request more?
Yeah, so our agency used to do just a query letter. I think we've changed it now. So we might have, maybe the person where they're reading the information just might have not been updated online. Now we do query letter, and I think the first 5 pages or 10 pages pasted in. But there's a few reasons. I always say that I have the utmost respect for writers. There is nobody on the pedestal that I put higher than writers, right? Like they are the person that makes the entire writing world go round, right? Like publishers are a multi-billion-dollar industry. Would they have these multi-billions of dollars without writers? No, they would not, right? So like, as I said, I think in this hierarchy, in this ecosystem, I put writers really, really highly up on my list. And because of that, I don't like getting writers' hopes up. I really just want to be like honest with them. I really just want them to be clear about like what I'm reading or what I'm interested in. If I want to request more, I will let you know, those lines of communication. I try to be really clear. So one of the reasons why we used to just do a query letter was, I just wanted to see the query letter. And then if I wanted to request more, then, again, there would be a call to action. We would engage with emails and we would go back and forth and start to build that relationship. But I don't always think it's fair to kind of ask for a full manuscript, but I'm not going to read your full manuscript if that wasn't what I wanted. You know what I'm trying to say? So that's why we're pretty clear about like, this is what we want and why. If we want more, we'll let you know, that sort of thing. So can we share query letters that sparked you to request more? So that's kind of why we started this podcast. So it's called The Shit No One Tells You About Writing. New episodes launch every Thursday. The first half of every episode, we critique 3 query letters like live on the podcast. And so you'll hear us talk about like, this is what worked, this is what didn't. And you'll hear me, what you'll hear me say, like, what is that I liked about them. I've signed 2 clients from the podcast as well. Just because, again, these are writers trying to get an agent. So I would really recommend, checking out the podcast. It's free every Thursday. There's a new episode. There's like a 1.5 years worth of content for everybody. So there's happy listening to everybody.
Yeah, the podcast is really great if you have a chance to listen to it, and you should submit your query letters there. How many query letters do you get a day? I remember when I was interning at ICM, I had to go through 500. So I'm assuming that you must get 500 to 1,000 letters at least.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
So So our agency gets them all to one email, and it's just like query@psliterary.com. They'll go to one place. I filter it so that I'm only looking at queries addressed to me generally. I used to when I was more, of an up and coming agent and was looking for more clients, I would read all of the query letters that got sent to all the agents just in case, there was something that worked for me. But I kind of just look at my own queries now. So I don't really get that many personally. I probably get like 30 a day myself, but the agency gets like 2,000 a month is usually like our average. And there's, we have like 6 agents now. So yeah, there's a lot of queries.
It's pretty competitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can a mostly completed creative nonfiction manuscript be submitted for proposal?
Yeah, so with nonfiction, a lot of it is sold on proposal. So, and a really great proposal could do a lot of the heavy lifting, right? Because a really great proposal also, you have gone through the process of like outlining what your book is about, writing chapter summaries, like you essentially create this blueprint for the book that is to come. So, with something like this, it kind of depends on like what type of creative nonfiction, right? Like a memoir should really be finished because it needs to kind of read like a novel for commercial publishing, for trade publishing, right? Like we want it to be propulsive and have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and be a bit of a page turner. If it's something more like narrative nonfiction, prescriptive nonfiction, with a personal twist, something like that, that can really be sold on proposal. So you can just write a really robust proposal and then have, an introduction, ideally like 3-4 sample chapters, something like that. But I know a lot of agents don't sign memoirs unless they're full manuscripts. Again, but if you had a really robust proposal, maybe that would get you the agent. Other things in that space that could get you an agent are also things like, if it is creative nonfiction and you wrote an article or an essay, that got published or went viral or whatever, right? Like that's the type of stuff where you could just probably make a really robust proposal and be able to include all that information, because there's a lot of agents that also want to help shape creative nonfiction, right? Like when projects come to us finished, there is some like editing that kind of goes into it, but sometimes it is nice. Some agents do want to get it on that creative stage to kind of help flush out and kind of shape the project that is to come. So there's a few ways of looking at it. I don't think there's a harm if you have a really robust proposal. When I say robust proposal, I mean like a 70-page proposal. Like I'm not like, I mean a really meaty piece of work. So I don't think there's no harm. The worst that an agent can say is like, oh, just come back to me when you have some more, or, I'll look forward to seeing the full manuscript, right? Or best case scenario, you get an agent from it. So I think there's a lot that can be said for a really, really good proposal. A really good template, I always just say, go to Jane Friedman's website. Jane Friedman, she's a publishing expert, and she just has a really great template that I kind of refer everybody to.
Great, thanks. Do you have different versions of your email when requesting fulls, i.e. a basic one versus one asking quite a bit for more information?
Yeah, so I don't personally do my requesting. So I just like flag things in my inbox, and then one of the agency assistants does all the requesting. So I actually don't know what the form emails look like right now, because I just kind of bury my requests off, and then they get shepherded back to me once they come to my inbox. I actually don't know. There was a time when I did ask for very specific information, and I would ask for your full manuscript. I would ask for, what are you working on next? All your comp titles, potentially a marketing plan, if you had one. So yeah, I mean, I think I've tamped that down a little bit. But yeah, I've been doing this 13 years, and I think there's some questions ahead about the actual like publishing industry itself. And it's changed a lot over the years, right? And so, but I always come back to the idea of, if I'm gonna represent a manuscript or a project, like I'm gonna be in love with it, right? And I'm gonna work hard for it. So I'm really just looking to fall in love with the words on the page. If it is a project where it is a bit more kind of based on platform, or you're an expert, and we kind of the whole kind of saleability of the project depends on you being an expert in your field, we're going to want to talk about platform, social media, that sort of thing. But otherwise, it's just the book, my love of the book.
I remember when you first sent me, I think your assistant requested a synopsis, and I said, I don't have a synopsis. I don't know what that is. But thankfully, we still had the conversation, and that was
I know writers hate synopses so much, and yet they are useful at a certain stage, but I these days I think I just say like, if you have one, that would be great. A lot of editors will also ask for it. So it's like at the, if I'm to sign somebody and then send it out on submission, editors might want it at that point. So at some point you kind of have to write one. It's just when you write that, I think is up to you.
I mean, my students all wrote one last week, so they're all prepared now. So what is the average word count for a fiction book? And how flexible are ideal word counts for certain genres? For example, under 40,000 words for middle grade.
Yeah. So I don't do a lot of kidlit, so I don't have like a lot of strong opinions about the kidlit space. I will say for adult fiction, I don't really think you want it to be under 65,000 words. Ideally, in this market, I don't think it's a good idea to be over 100,000, unless you're writing science fiction, fantasy, or historical, where there's like a huge level of world building. It's really tough. It's tough for a few reasons. Like, the current consumer's attention span is negligible, right? We've all been through COVID. We're like toggling between our apps. We're like watching our Netflix. We're just like, how can we, consume content, right? And like, that's how frazzled everybody's brains are. So I think it's really challenging to have a book that is longer than 100,000 words in this market. The other thing when books really start to get long is that translators, if you are lucky to get to the point where you get a book deal and potential foreign rights, when you translate a book over 100,000 words into a language like German, like, do you know how long that book gets? It gets expensive. It gets very expensive and very long. You have to pay the translator more money. You have to pay for more paper, right? The book has to be more expensive, right? There's all these like other costs kind of involved in the publishing side of things when you think about how much a long book costs to make. I don't know if there's any questions kind of coming up about like, we've had a big paper shortage. It's been really hard for publishers to find paper to even print books. Books are getting bumped, pub dates are getting moved around just because of the paper shortage, right? And so if these long books might scare publishers a little bit. So I'm always a fan of like a more punchy novel, so if we can get under 100,000 words, that's great. I will say one of my clients just sent me a 114,000 word novel, and I'm like, oh, I love you to bits. I'm going to read the whole thing, obviously, but like, I'm going to try and find a way for us to get it down to 100.
Yeah, cutting down is hard. I mean, I think I always send you too many pages too. So.
No, I know. And a part of the question was about how flexible they are. So, I mean, flexible, as I said, I kind of have a mental cutoff of around 100,000 because I think, I don't know. It's just a challenge, for a lot of reasons. And so it's not to say I won't request something if it's like 105,000 words. And I don't think publishers have these kind of cutoffs either. But if something is too short, it just suggests like there's just not enough plot. There's just not enough book. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of, a trigger. And for certain genres, like a cozy mystery, right? A cozy mystery only needs to be 65,000 words. So, as I said, every genre has its own kind of expectations. So as long as you're kind of following your genre's general expectations, that's all we have.
Great, thanks.
Where does one address a query letter? I'm a little late into the meeting and I missed that.
Address in what sense? Like, like
how would I send you a query letter for a novel I'd like you to look at?
Yeah, so query at psliterary.com. Query, query at psliterary.com.
I'm sorry, query at?
Yeah. My agency is PS Literary Agency, so it's psliterary.com.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so how does an agent promote your work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think a lot of agents do different type of work, not, I am a certain type of agent that tends to be a bit more hands-on, tends to be a bit more on the internet, tends to want to, shout from the rooftop a little bit more. Sorry, I just saw in the chat, somebody did get the email address wrong. It's just query, not queries, query at psliterary.com. Sorry, where was I going with this thought? Oh yes. So personally, I am very hands-on. I think as Lindsay can probably attest to, right? Like I'm there for the good times. I'm good for the bad times. I'm good there for the cover conversations. I'm there for the marketing plan. There are agents who just sell the book and walk away. Like that's the job really, is to sell books, right? And so some agents, that's all they want to do. But I feel like to help my authors get the most amount of success, I am invested in their success, right? Like as an agent, I don't get paid unless my clients get paid, right? So as a business tool, I'm also like, I want to help my clients prosper in their career. That helps me. It's a mutually beneficial relationship. Like that's just how the ecosystem of our relationship works. And over the course of the years that I've been doing this, I've found different ways to kind of be able to help promote, whether, I was one of the first kind of group of agents to really take Twitter seriously. I have like 40,000 followers on Twitter now. I was really active to really make sure I was like spreading the word there. I had a blog for 5 years. I blogged every Monday. And I built up huge following, and I would like talk about my author's work on my blog and won some awards from Writer's Digest. And it was like that era of my life ended. And then I've been on Instagram quite a bit and sharing my clients' work on there. And then we started the podcast, and I share clients' work on there. So I feel like I try to follow the evolution of where readers are spending their time so that I can help writers in that space. I also understand that I'm unique and sometimes the way that I think about marketing and positioning in that way. I know all agents don't think about it like that, but I just feel like you have to kind of be multidisciplinary in that approach and kind of intersectional in that approach, because books are sold from so many formats and kind of expanding an author's brand just happens in so many spaces now. And I just think it's a bit narrow-minded just to think about the book space. So I try to think about it as holistically and in terms of the internet and bookstores and in person and social media and all of that. So I think that's a unique question to all agents, but that's my answer.
I think you have people on TikTok, right? Or some clients. I'm kind of scared of it, so I'm not on it.
I know. I haven't got on it either. So I am a little scared of TikTok. So TikTok is actually selling a lot of copies. So there was a stat. So TikTok helped sell 20 million books in 2021 as a platform. 20 million books were sold, potentially through all the views on Book Talk and that sort of thing. I'm not on it because it is owned by a huge Chinese media company. And I'm pretty sure they're just spying on us and watching what we're doing. So I'm like a little bit scared about what's happening with all our backend data with TikTok. So I'm not on it.
We should ask Joanna what she thinks. She's the expert on China.
I know. And she, at one point, she was even like, I don't want to have meetings on Zoom because of, who knows what's happening with our technology. But I feel like we have to embrace it because it is our tool. Zoom is how we're all here today, right? So there's so many benefits to technology and we need to lean into it.
True. So what are some literary trends in Canada? Is literary Western literature or World War II still being done?
Yeah, that's a good question. So my business model, I'm based in Ottawa. I'm Canadian. I tend to do a lot more business in the US for a couple of reasons. I think my taste is a bit more kind of commercial to upmarket. I don't do a lot of kind of super capital L literary fiction. Lindsay is one of my only literary fiction clients. And one of the reasons is because she writes these page-turning literary books. So I am very drawn to Lindsay's style of writing, but I don't do a whole lot of literary fiction. I will say that World War II is over for now. I can kind of say that definitively. I don't like to say that all the time about friends being like, it's black and it's white, or it's this and it's that. World War II, there's some fatigue, I would say. There's some World War II fatigue out there for sure. That said, I'm working on a book right now and it has a publisher. So there is still a market. It's just like we're on a bit of a fatigue for World War II. Literary Westerns, I always feel like if anything is done right and it's done well and it's done in an exciting way, there's a space for everything. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see a huge flashy deal for a World War II novel again very soon. But I don't recommend following waves of trends, right? Because there's nobody else that's written a book like you because you've never written that book before. So I don't know. I put that all in the rearview mirror.
Great. And how do I find agents interested in Black queer memoirs?
That's a great question. So firstly, just look and see what agents are selling, or if there's memoirs that are like yours that are out there that you think like, hey, that's a comp for my book. I'd be looking at the agents that sold that. I'd be looking at any agent that has, LGBTQIA kind of, on their list, on their wish list, any kind of like BIPOC rep that they're looking at on their wish list, and memoirs in general, I think there's such a outpouring of interest for stories that are just unlike anything we've seen before. So I would just say, go forth, query widely. Any agent that's looking for a memoir would probably be interested.
Yeah, Manuscript Wishlist is a great resource. Publishers Weekly as well. I think I found Carly a Manuscript Wishlist, so and Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah. There's also, the hashtag Manuscript Wishlist, like MSWL on Twitter, poetsandwriters.org, regional and conferences, national conferences. You can see, like, what agents are kind of coming to events, so you can kind of see. There's also the phone book guides to agents. Writer's Digest does the literal phone book of agents every year. You can get it from the library. You don't even have to buy it. I think most libraries stock it as something they buy every year. So, but the internet is your greatest tool. There's also, I think that was mentioned in my bio, I'm part of the Canadian Agents Association and the American Agents Association. So you can go and just go to their websites. It's PACLA is the Canadian one, and then AALA is the American one. And you can just go and see all the members who are part of it. You don't have to be a part of it, part of the agency associations to be an agent, but it is a place that you can look for agents.
Great, very helpful. The next question is, how do I publish poetry?
Yeah, so poetry, it's having a renaissance, which I am thrilled about. I'm a huge poetry fan and poetry reader. I think the internet, Instagram has been great to poets. I think it's really created a whole new interest for people who maybe, weren't reading it or buying it before. So a lot of editors actually have it on their wish list now. So it is obviously there's Copper Canyon, right? There's the publishers, the poetry publishers that are always going to do poetry, but I am seeing more of it. I'm seeing a lot more of it. So a couple things in terms of just starting to get your work out there, right? You'd be pitching the Walrus and Room, right? You're pitching these, these journals and sort of things to kind of get your individual poems out there. But if you want to put a collection together, that's kind of when you could sell it to a publisher, is putting a collection together. You just don't want to have everything already sold or already out there, because then why would somebody want to buy your book? So I would just recommend getting your name out there with a few poems published, and then starting to put your collection together, and then shopping your collection around to publishers.
Great, thanks. The next question: an author has an offer from a small press, but wants to find an agent before signing the contract. Tips. This
is a tricky one. I think a lot of writers have gotten into a pickle, many pickles this way, pickles upon pickles, pickled pickles, because it's hard to work backward kind of at this stage, right? Especially with a small press, there's not always a lot an agent can do in terms of the contract. A lot of times it is very they'll just say, this is the contract, we're not going to negotiate it. Some of them will even say, right? Which is unfortunate, but that is kind of the way that it goes sometimes, because they just don't have the human power, the resources to have a contracts department and stuff, right? It is what it is. I understand why you would want one for sure. If you were querying agents and small presses at the same time, then you could go to the agents who have your materials and say hey, I got an offer from this publisher, just so you know, I kind of need to make a decision about representation. Can you let me know by X date? Put a timeline on it for those agents that are reading it right now. If you don't have any leads on any agents, it's really hard to just go into somebody's query inbox and just be I have an offer from a small press. Will you look at this again? Because as an agent, I'm always thinking so say I get an email like that into the slush pile, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, what if I thought I could have sold that somewhere else? And now you have this offer in hand. And if you want to accept that offer, I'm not using my agenting skills here really, because there's not a whole lot of wiggle room that I could deliver to kind of help improve upon this deal. And if you don't want to pull the deal so we can shop it openly, there's just, it can create some bad blood, wasting people's time. It's, as I said, that's why I'm saying pickles upon pickles, right? Nobody wants to be putting professional colleagues in situations like that. So if you're concerned about the contract, find an IP lawyer or an entertainment lawyer to review it, right? I don't think anybody should be signing anything, without having somebody else look at it. But if you can't find an agent in time, that's kind of what I would do. But yeah, you're putting yourself in a bit of a tricky situation trying to sub everybody and do it all at once, I think.
Yeah, good advice. What is the latest on upmarket fiction? I think, I think the question is
on the upmarket fiction market. Yeah. So it's really just so I'll kind of maybe explain a little bit what upmarket fiction is, right? So kind of commercial fiction is what we consider like crime, thrillers, like police procedurals, cozy mysteries. Anything commercial would probably be, the most kind of readable things you can kind of think about, the kind of airport novels, that sort of thing, things that are sold at, drugstore, Shoppers Drug Mart, right? That sort of thing. And then literary fiction is what we consider kind of this more like capital L literary fiction is what I call it, right? It's like, does it have a word potential? Is it based on the kind of the craft and kind of the finesse of the actual language itself, right? Like these are kind of our two ends of our kind of, I've made infographics before because I always kind of explain all these. I do have an infographic actually that explains this all. Anyway, and in the middle is upmarket fiction, right? And this is the space in the middle. And it's in the middle because it blends these two things. A lot of times it's a bit more character driven, but it also is heavy with plot, right? So we have our page turning up qualities of commercial fiction. We have our craft of language, character driven bits with our literary fiction. But we don't believe its merits are determined by its literary quality. We believe its literary merits are determined by its readability and accessibility and how much we want to recommend it to friends and talk about it with our book club. So this is why it's called this upmarket. Is just kind of what we call this middle market part in terms of these spaces. So this upmarket space is growing a lot. It's growing a lot more into like the literary space. So there is upmarket fiction that can be considered very literary fiction. I think about somebody like Maggie Shipstead would probably be in that category for me, where it's like pretty literary, but is always kind of be packaged and presented and writing about topics that are more book clubby. And then there's our commercial fiction, right, where we're talking like genre, like crime thriller, right, like psychological suspense, right? Like we know exactly when we know a category, we know we're talking about commercial fiction. And so there's a lot of kind of more like upmarket fiction that touches that kind of commercial space where it is very, we're turning these pages really fast, but it could be like a meatier topic. I'm thinking about We Are Not Like Them by Joe Piazza and Christine Pride. Something like that, which is like very readable, very page turner, but the goal is for people to talk about it, right? That's what the kind of market space is all about. It's like, how do we generate conversation around these topics and around these books? So all that to say, that's kind of how I imagine the market to be. And I do think it's growing, it's bleeding a bit more into these spaces because in the commercial space, we've lost the mass market format. So if you guys know any publishing nerds here, like the mass market's kind of like those like romance novel styles, right? Upmarket novels are usually sold in a bit more of like a size like this, trade paperback. And then obviously literary fiction is usually sold in more of like a little bit bigger in a hardcover. Right. So those are our three sizes. Mass market is kind of no longer being produced because audiobooks and ebooks have kind of eaten into that market. So there's not really a need for mass markets anymore. It's kind of just dropped off. So that's kind of why we lost a bit of the kind of the bottom part of that commercial market. And so things are just generally being packaged more and presented more like a market fiction if it's not kind of a category like category romance, crime thrillers. So I hope that makes sense. I have an infographic on my website about commercial upmarket literary. Oh, I also did a series on Instagram, little reels, like kind of like little TikToks, like little reels about like what is literary, what is commercial, what is upmarket. But upmarket's my favorite thing to work on because I think, books that people want to talk about, that's my jam, right? Like I think that's why I work in publishing is because I want to work on books that make people are moved to speak with others about them.
Great. And where can we find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so it's just at Carly Waters. So my name here, you'll see at Carly Waters, all one word.
Yeah. Great. And going back to social media, how much
Yeah.
is a writer's social media presence factoring into an agent's decision to take them on these days?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I said before, right? Like nonfiction, it's kind of imperative, right? If you're going to say I'm an expert in something, it's like you have to prove you're an expert, right? So it's like, is it social media? Is it TED Talks? Is it speaking engagements? Is it podcast? Is it newsletter, right? Like what is the thing that tells me you're an expert? That's the nonfiction side. The fiction side is not driven at all by social media. The only thing that I care about on social media, and I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but like that you're not an asshole, like you know what I mean, like you're a person that I would want to work with. So it's very important to me that I like you as a person and that I would want to work with you, and you're not saying things that I find offensive, like sexist, racist stuff. right? Like that's the kind of stuff that I don't want to see, and the people that I wouldn't want to work with, right? So I'm more concerned with, are you consistent? Are you generally likable on the internet? Not that you have a huge platform. So
Yeah, I remember when I first signed with you, I didn't even have anything online, and you convinced me to get on Twitter, and you helped me with that website. I was terrified. I was like, I don't know how to tweet. Like, what do I
you
say?
just need we got you there. We got you there.
I use it now. Okay. What types of children's books are most publishable these days with regards to topic and style?
Children's books. Okay, so I work on mostly picture books, a little bit of YA, not really any middle grade. So I'm not kind of the best person to necessarily answer this. I will say that with picture books, I think it's really not about being having a teachable moment, right? That's not the goal, right? We're not like teachers. I think entertainment is the goal for children, focusing on how to be entertaining. I also think with children, there's two goals, right? It's like, who's the buyer of the book and who's the reader of the book? The buyer of the book is an adult with a wallet and a bank account who has money to spend, right? That's who's buying the book, right? And so those books inside jokes for adults and children. I'm thinking of the like How to Babysit a Grandma book and all of those types of ones like that have inside jokes for adults. Those ones are do really well because like the adults get the joke too. And they want to buy it because it's like it's they get something out of it. If you're going to read, like I have two small children, like if I'm going to read books to my kids every night, like I gravitate to the ones that like I find entertaining, right? And then the other thing is who's the audience, right? Children. And they just want to be entertained, right? Like, especially kids are in school all day. They've got their teaching, like unless, you feel like you have to do some extra work at home, but like reading is homework sometimes, right? And so I think we can find ways to incorporate, reading in a way that should be entertaining and fun for kids. For me, again, as a parent, also is like my goal for my kids is just like, how do we foster lifelong reading? Like, how do we foster a lifelong interest in books? And to me, it's just like entertaining. So I gravitate towards, I think, things that are a bit more entertaining with children's books. And then with middle grade, again, not my expertise, so I don't know too much about that. YA, I'm not super into the into the YA world necessarily, but again, I think it is a lot of just entertainment value, right? Like these are teens that want to be seen. I think there's such a huge push towards diversity and visibility and making sure that everybody feels seen in all their children's books. There's a really big move for that. I think every year the stats come out from the Lee and Low survey about there's always a statistic that always drives me and everybody crazy. It's like in children's books, there's often more children's books about animals than there are about children of color. So it's like books about animals, books about white kids, like books about children of color. It's like, how are there more books about animals than there are about children of color, right? So things like that, I think, are things that the industry is trying to work towards, making a more visible space for children to see themselves in kid lit.
It's really interesting. What factors determine a novel's commercial success?
Well, unsurprisingly, I'm going to say selling a lot of books, number one. So what goes obviously into selling a lot of books? I know that's the question. So there's a lot of things. I really like unpacking the word success. It's kind of one of my favorite things to do. Like, what does success mean to you? Does it mean that you earn out your advance? Does it mean that you get a new contract? Does it mean you get to buy a new car? Does it mean you get to sit on the bestseller list for a while, right? Like, there's a lot of different things that are what success means to anybody. So I kind of love unpacking that word a little bit. Success in the eyes of your publisher also means something. Like anecdotally, it's known like once you get to about half of your advance, like earning out half your advance, is generally when a publisher starts making money. So once you've kind of hit like that 50 to like 100% of earning out your advance, like you're good basically in terms of like the publisher's eyes. Obviously, you want to earn royalties above that. You want to sell more copies and you want to be on bestseller lists and that sort of thing. But in terms of what determines it, it's moving a lot of copies. Like, do you have pre-orders to kind of generate some sales? Do you have publicity and marketing to kind of support it? Do you have actual units in the store. So if somebody sees you on a morning show and they go to Indigo, are you going to be there, right? Like the stock has to be there. So the publisher has to be able to meet demands for how, you know, how many people want to buy your book. So there's a lot of puzzle pieces, a lot of people working together to kind of make all of it happen. I think it's also great with like ebooks and audiobooks, right? There's like so many ways that people can access your books these days, you know, in commercial trade publishing, right? This, you know, most books are published simultaneously in EP and ideally audio within a few weeks. Pretty much all publishers now are trying to time all of these formats together. So yeah, it's really just about finding readers where they are, building a literary community, you know, having people there to support you and buy your books, getting great reviews. And it's like having all the stars align, and you know, it's like having the sun shine on you, right? It's like we can't predict anything. You know, we hope the sun shines on our wedding day, right? But it's like, who knows, right? It's like so many things have to come together to make it all happen. So if I had the answer, every single one of my books would be like rocket into the top of bestseller list, right? But we build careers over years and years and years and years, right? And so there's so many things that go into it.
Good answer. When should you query a literary agent? Should I wait until the manuscript is finished?
Yeah, so your novel should be done. Definitely done, because it's hard for me to offer on a book that's not finished yet, because I'm like, where's the rest of the book going? I kind of need to know, you know, how to write the rest of the book. So ideally your manuscript is finished. With nonfiction, again, it could just be a really robust proposal, but novels should be done.
And does it have to be professionally edited before they send it to you?
No, it doesn't. Some people will hire editors at various stages of their career. I'm not a huge advocate for it always, because I also feel like authors need to have a certain level of self-editing skills to kind of, you know, get them in the door a little bit. But there is some of my clients have, you know, and, you know, some of them were a bit lost, you know, they were like, I have this idea and like, I just don't know how to get over the finish line, right? Like there's many reasons. I just hate creating a barrier to entry that has a price tag. So I don't usually like to advocate that everybody needs to, because I don't think you do.
Yeah. Beta readers are always really great when you're starting out, writing groups. So what are the 3 biggest mistakes when querying?
3 biggest mistakes. So I think querying too early. It's hard to know what's too early, but like a lot of people query too early, they just don't know, right? Number 2 is making your query too long, trying to sell me like your whole life, or sell me like on everything the book is possibly ever about, right? It's like, you just got to write one query letter that gets my attention, right? Like, I just think the overwriting and like it's like, I have this one chance with this agent, I have to tell them everything, right? It's like, no, you don't. You just got to pitch me this one book. Third thing is kind of a smaller thing, but I feel like I talk a lot about comp titles, and what comp titles are is like comparative titles. So it's like, my book is like this, you know, or fans of this book will also like my book, right? Like, what marketplace does your book sit in? And so I feel like wildly off base comp titles always kind of is a bit of a red flag for me, or if it's like super old books, it's like, my book is like 2 classics, right? Like Wuthering Heights meets like Age of Innocence. And I'd be like, well, those books weren't published in 2022. You know, it's like, I'm selling books in this marketplace. So really old comps, really obscure comps are sometimes challenging, because then I'm like, those books sold like 12 copies, you know, it's like, I want you to sell more than 12 copies. So, you know, picking comps that we feel like reflect the sizability of the market, are like yours, and just show like some potential, right? Like, as I said, my job as an agent is to sell your book to as many people as I can. And so I hope that, you know, we'll find large audiences for your book. So I think comps, it's always nice when you can project an audience, and I don't mean like you're saying your book is an ex-Gone Girl, like, please don't do that. But, you know, saying like, there's a market here, like, hey, all these books like mine have sold well.
Great. How do I identify my market?
So that's another kind of word I want to unpack a little bit, because market, it's like, you don't know what your market is because you're not a retailer, you know? Like, I think when you think about like category, maybe it would be a better word, like crime, thriller, romance, right? Like, those are types of categories. I don't think you need to identify your market. I think you probably just need to identify what bookshelf your book would sit on, that kind of thing. Or in publishing, it's called like metadata is like all of the kind of like the hashtags, right? Like under your book. And so when you think about your metadata, you'd think, and you don't have to create this or anything, it's what the publishers do. But on Amazon, if somebody like it does an SEO search, like a search for books about frogs, whatever. I just picked frogs. So, and then it was like, so then on Amazon, like books about frogs would come up, right? And then it would be like your book would come up at the top. So it's like whatever is in your book or something has something to do with your book, these are the types of things that you're aligning with. So if you wanted to figure out what your book is going to be about, you kind of have to think about what are all these like sub threads of my book, and how does that all kind of come together. Really, I don't think that it's an author's responsibility at the querying stage to do too much work on this, really. Like, I think this is a publishing problem. I don't think this is a you problem. I think if you can find enough comps, whether it's crime or thriller or romance, that's kind of it. I think that's it.
Great. And where do you think publishing is headed?
Ooh, I mean, gosh, do we have another hour, Lindsay? Like,
You have 10 minutes.
I have 10 minutes. Okay, I'll do my best. Okay, so the book business is doing well, really, really, really well. And I always love unending on this note because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, right? This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's people and writers out there that are making big bucks, like there is money to be made, there is success to be had. Authors are what makes the world go round. I think, the book business is doing well. It's for the past 2 years, there's been 8% growth, which is really great. The audio industry has had double-digit growth for over 10 years, like incredible, right? Like not only are we finding a new format to reach readers, we're also expanding that business. Like the pie is getting bigger, which I think is incredible. So as I said with TikTok, right? Like TikTok helped sell 20 million books last year. In a business so traditional as publishing, to imagine our pie getting bigger, like it's so exciting to me. I think it's a really exciting thing. So I think the book business is doing well. I think we're in for a lot more rocky road in terms of consolidation, between mergers, between publishers. We're going to be losing imprints. We're going to be losing editors. What that will filter down to is people starting their own independent presses, just like, how we saw a lot of independent bookstores pop up over the past 5 years, right? Because Barnes and Noble pushed a lot of people out. I think we're going to see some more independent independent publishers kind of popping out after people kind of leave publishing after some mergers and acquisitions. I think the big are going to get bigger and the small might get smaller, but I do think there's some room kind of in the middle for some independent publishers to pop up. Yeah, no, I feel good, I guess is my answer. Like I feel good about where it's going. I think there's money to be made and a lot more exciting books to be read.
Great. And how do I pitch a book that's part of a potential series?
Yeah, so always pitch the first book, and then the bottom say this is the first book in a planned series, or at the front, but like, top or the bottom. But this is the first book in a planned series is always a nice thing to say, because really you have to pitch us on the first book, because there is no multi-book deal unless the first book is really good.
Mm-hmm. That's true. So often people will just write a trilogy, right? And be like, here it is.
One book at a time.
What should I expect from the publishing process as a new writer? And what are the realities and best practices? Yeah,
so it's really hard for me to say because every experience is so different. I mean, at Lindsay, as you can probably say from your different publishers, like you've had a different experience everywhere you've gone, right? So I also think the size of the publisher, influences the decision. But generally what you can expect is you will sell your book to somebody. Somebody will edit your book. It will go into production. You will be assigned somebody in marketing and publicity that will help kind of figure out what the plan is in terms of reaching all these potential readers. It will generally be typeset. You will get kind of approval over those last kind of look at it. Proofread, copy edited. Usually it's printed overseas. It gets shipped back. Through that process of kind of doing the final touches and the printing, the publisher is doing some sell into the bookstores, meaning they're calling up Indigo, they're calling up Amazon, they're calling up everybody being like, how many copies of this book do you want to take, right? And so when those orders come in, that's how they know how many to print. The book gets shipped back and makes its way into the bookstore. I think the level of attention to detail changes with every publisher. The amount of marketing publicity you're going to get is going to change with every publisher. And so obviously, I'm an agent, I'm always going to advocate for agents, but like, we're the people that help keep the wheels on the ground, like we're the ones that make sure if publisher's going to say they're going to do something, then they're going to do it, right? We get to be the bad guy, we get to be the good guy. We're there to help you with, cover approval, and usually we ask for blurbs, and there's so many things that go into the process that are so unique. And I think what an agent's biggest asset is, like, we have eyeballs into dozens of different publishing houses, right? Like, we see everything that's going on, and we can see roadblocks before you even know the roadblock might be coming, and so we know how to kind of like guard against things or prepare for things, and make strategy around how we can kind of get around these roadblocks together to make the most successful publishing story for you.
Great. And how do I research publishing and stay up to date with everything that is going on?
Yeah, so there's a few different places. Lindsay mentioned a couple of them. There's Publishers Weekly. In Canada, there's Quill and Quire. Twitter, obviously, I'm on Twitter, so I'm following the people that are kind of breaking publishing news. There's also the Publishers Marketplace newsletter. It's called Publishers Lunch. I don't know if you have to be a paying subscriber just to get the lunch email. It's like every day at lunch is what they call it. I'm obviously a paying subscriber, so I get access to everything, but that might be something where, it could be free. Jane Friedman, I know I talk about Jane Friedman all the time, but she's an angel. She does a newsletter. It's called The Hot Sheet. It's paid, but it is the best money that you'll spend. I think it's maybe $65 a year, and it's every other week. And it's the best of like indie publishing, kind of independent publishers, self-publishing, large publishers, from a very objective point of view, from a more cultural criticism type of lens, trend lens. It's the best $65 you're going to spend, in my mind.
Great, that's very helpful. And I just want to emphasize to our English students, Carly, you studied English Lit in your undergrad, right? And so, and being an agent was just something naturally that came to you?
Yeah, so I, like many people, probably thought I was going to teach, and then I realized that I don't like the teaching part as much as I like the books part of things. And I have the highest respect for teachers, because I'm like, you guys are the best. You guys know what you want to do and you know how to teach. I'm one of those people where it was like, I got there and I was like, it's just not what I thought it was going to be. And I was like, okay, what is it that I liked? Right? It was the book. So then I thought, what am I going to do about that? Right. And so I was like, how do books get onto the shelves? What is it about the publishing business? Right. And I kind of figured all that out. And so I enrolled in a master's in publishing course to kind of help me figure out where I wanted to be in the business. And they sent us the textbooks kind of ahead of the school program in the fall. And so I started reading my textbooks like a very keen little student I was. And I got to this section about literary agents, and I was like, that's it. Like, there's the light bulb moment, it's like, how would anybody want to do any other job? I'm like, I get to work directly with authors, work on contracts, travel, meet all the different publishers at the fairs. I get to do publicity and marketing, think strategy, think big picture, be entrepreneurial, I'm an independent contractor. I work for an agency, but I'm my own boss. I pick all my own clients. So for me, I couldn't imagine a better job. And so I feel lucky every day I get to do it.
Thank you so much, Carly. I think we have time for maybe one or two questions in the chat. I see someone's asking about word counts for nonfiction.
Yeah, so word counts for nonfiction. Really, so if it has like diagrams and charts, it's also hard for me to say. Like cookbooks, again, it's like hard for me to say. Generally, if it's going to have a lot of art, graphs, charts, things like that, maybe we're looking at like 50,000. But if we're looking at just like straight narrative, like 80,000. If it also has a lot of notes in the back end, like a lot of research, obviously the word count will get higher with all those notes in the back, but I mean like actual content, maybe 80.
Great, thanks. Have you let go of any of your clients' authors, and what were the reasons?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this 13 years, so there's there's relationships that work really well, and there's sometimes we just get to a roadblock where we're just like, we just have different philosophies about something. So, generally I feel like, as any agent, right, we're signing up projects and authors because we have the highest hopes, right? Like, my biggest asset is my time, right? Like what I give is my time, and that's a huge thing. So I'm giving as much as I possibly can, trying to get things off the ground. I often say, like, if I can't sell 3 of your books, I'm like, maybe we're just not the right fit. It could be me, it could be you, it could just be we're not jiving, right? You just need an agent to kind of set you off on a new path. It's very common not to sell your first book, right? And then you often write the second one, and then it's like, okay, I try and sell the second one. And then it's like, oh, we get to the third one. Like, we just might not be the best partners. Or it could be that we get to the point where, their idea for future books are just different than mine, right? And we're going in a different direction. So there's a million reasons. And I really I have, as I said, I have the most respect for writers. And so I always feel like, if it's better to send them on their way, and because that's the best for their path, it happens, unfortunately. It's always sad. It feels like a breakup.
Oh, so sad, but the realities of publishing.
I know. Thank you guys so much. This has been a blast.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's 1:30 now. I really want to thank you for your time and everyone for submitting your questions. They're all really great.
Yeah. You guys were lovely. I could see half of your faces and the rest of your names. So thank you so much for sharing your energy and your space and your questions with me. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks, Carly. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Have a great day. Bye.